And welcome to Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site. We are the retro talk program for nostalgia and baby boomer stuff here on the Galaxy Nostalgia Network. I'm Smitty.
I'm Mike.
I'm George.
And I'm Mike Z.
And on today's show, we talk about the 1973 baseball season, and we also talk about Lincoln Logs, Erector Sets, and Snap Trains. Well, welcome everybody to another edition of Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site. We're so happy to have you with us. And we have another fun show lined up for you that we hope that you will enjoy. Well, here we are still. It is summer slowly but surely taking its course, sort of winding down. Mike Bragg has been out at garage sales, and he's been checking out all kinds of goodies. And he's also been out shopping, looking for some toys for his little grandson. And you've been finding some pretty interesting stuff, Mike. What have you been finding out there in the garage sale and collectible world?
Well, you know, as we've mentioned in other shows, Smitty, I'm always trying to find the next best, coolest thing that will blow out the stops on eBay and I will make $1 million. It hasn't happened yet, so I go to garage sales and I look for the 25-cent books. And most of them that I find are not 25 cents, they're 50 cents, but I found an interesting book. I found a book on wooden toys, the history of wooden toys, but I want to talk today about the wooden toys of the 1950s because, as you mentioned, I've been out and around looking for some toys to buy my grandson for his first birthday coming up in August. And it occurred to me that if I brought any of these toys over that I played with, even if they were new and packaged, over to my daughter's house, she would look at them and say, what are these and what are they for? Oh, these are for Alex's birthday. Which one? Because they were very simple, yet they taught all the skills that today's kids are being taught with none of the technology, no battery power, no mechanics, so to speak. These were basically, for the most part, blocks of wood or strips of tin that were machined out and assembled in kits to where you could build things. And first I'm going to talk about the Lincoln Logs. The Lincoln Logs were actually, they came up as an idea from the son of Frank Lloyd Wright, John Lloyd Wright. He went with his dad during the construction, I believe in 1914, of the Imperial Hotel in Tokyo, and he saw the way his father was designing the construction of this modernistic hotel. And he came back and put together some ideas and came up with what's even known today as the Lincoln Logs. Now, these were notched out pieces of wood that were stained, usually a dark red color, and they would come in a round drum or a square drum, and you could make things other than actually log houses. You could make trucks and you could make things, and you had to use your fingers, and most importantly you had to use your imagination in concert with your fingers to come up with these things. And of course they gave you some instructions which you immediately threw away or your little brother ate, but we didn't use it. It's like nowadays, the instructions, not me, no. And they would come with Lincoln Logs cut out into little various sizes and green strips of board that would be the roof. And it didn't have to be the roof, it could be the train tracks for your Lincoln Log train. But Lincoln Logs were interesting because you imagine a toy that was popular to the point where it sold over 1 million sets by 1965, which was nothing more than machined out pieces of wood. They were the precursors to another wood-based toy. And by the way, I know these because I played with them, I got them for Christmas gifts and birthday gifts. So I remember my first set of Lincoln Logs, and they'd come out and you'd always lose one, and within 3 or 4 weeks you'd lose enough of them to where you really couldn't make anything satisfactory out of a Lincoln Log, so you threw it in the parakeet cage or used it as a shim.
But did you take it ever outside and you get your little magnifying lens and try to set them on fire?
Ah,
oh,
the wood burning kit.
Yes, the wood burning kit.
I still smell burning cork in my nostrils. They were great. I tried to do a wood burn of the Lone Ranger, and I started screaming words like golly tonto or something, and my mom took it away, and I never got my wood burning set. But no, I didn't. Actually, I did wood burn part of the next toy I'm going to talk about, the Tinkertoys. You remember the Tinkertoys? I know George does. Of course he does. But these were another machined wood item. They had sticks that were split on the ends, so it'd give you a little more grip when they went into the wooden dowels. And you could also put playing cards and little propellers and fins on them. You can make windmills and bridges, Tinkertoy bridges, machinery. Tinkertoys are still being sold. They're not made out of wood. I believe nowadays they're made out of plastic. As with Lincoln Logs, you can still find Lincoln Logs. They're not as eclectic, not as tech-savvy as today's toys, but they don't need batteries either. And you drop one in the toilet, and it's not the end of the world, and you're not going to have to go back to your big lot toy store and spend $100 for something else. But I'm going to go get a box of Tinkertoys and take it over to my year-old grandson and see what he does because those did develop motor skills. It's been proven. They were given in classes where they had challenged learning situations with some students, and the students actually developed as a result of being able to put these ideas together and engineer things in their very young, fertile minds. And I would like to thank the people who really created those basic toys, because in the 50s you had the steel trucks, the Tonka toys, of course, and you had the wood toys, electric trains, which were a lot more pricier. But if you couldn't afford an electric train, or it was 2 weeks after Christmas and you'd already broke the locomotive, or you'd used all of the little drops that made the smoke come out of the locomotives, or you switched the rheostat, the transformer, so fast, the Marx transformer back and forth so fast that you burned it up, then you had to go to what we called the snap trains. Now, snap trains were yet another wood item in the 50s. They were machined out by a router, and they were called snap trains, piece of wood that was routed out to create the tracks. They snapped together with a basic metal snap function, and you could play with those all day. You could put a snap train layout together in your living room. There were no batteries needed, no plugs, no AC power, no mechanical moving parts. These were just little pieces of wood with round cut-out dowels with tacks that held the wheels on, and I remember we could play all day long on those. Snap trains, Lincoln Logs, Tinkertoys. I'm bringing these back for today's kids whose little fertile brains are now turned to sausage because of the handheld games and the Sesame Street animated monsters. George, you remember that. We were talking before tape. We were talking about snap trains, and that was one of those. That's what's good about Galaxy Moonbeam. We bring thoughts that you did not think you would ever think of again, and suddenly we say snap trains. And George lit up when we brought it up at our pre-production meeting. George, remember your set?
Well, actually, yes, I do. It turns out that my mother had purchased me a snap train set that was all of the equipment and rolling stock that you'd have at an airport. Again, my love for aviation. And I guess as it turns out from our pre-show discussion, I learned that Mom must have acquired that particular set just before the company closed its doors for business, because I liked that so very much. I wanted to get some more, but Mom couldn't find it anymore, and today I learned why that was. I believe they closed their doors for business that same year, did they not?
They went out. Snap trains began in Los Angeles. They were called Jack Snap trains, and they were created in Los Angeles by a guy in 1956, and they had a short-lived run. I was fortunate to live in the era where snap trains came out because I got some one Christmas. I think it was the Christmas of maybe 59. But yes, George, by 1962, legend has it the guy padlocked the doors. Either he burned out or...
And that was when I got it, was
about
1962.
62, okay.
That's when I received it. I remember as a Christmas gift.
In 62, they were gone, never to return. There's a knockoff of the snap trains now, but they're made out of polyethylene plastic, and of course they're modernized, 21st century, and they probably don't even look like trains. But you know what, George? If you go to eBay and you type in snap trains, you're going to find some.
I'm sure of that. Do you know, you mentioned something about imagination. This year marks the 20th anniversary of a film titled Sandlot. It's about a group of kids growing up in the San Fernando Valley in the 1960s. They spent all summer playing baseball, but one of the most interesting aspects of the film is that in order to retrieve a baseball that they lost, it went into a nearby junkyard, that in order to try to retrieve that ball, which was guarded by a very large and mean dog, they had to use the Erector set. And they put together a very clever amalgamation of all the parts, and they had a Erector set that was like a crane. It was able to have a vehicle that was traveling by wheels, and they were able to scoop up the baseball. It was really quite unique what they did with the Erector set. I think when this film was released in the early 90s, it sparked a brief renaissance in the interest for Erector Sets. I would suggest to any members of our Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site audience to perhaps get that film, Sandlot, made in 1993, and you can see what we mean by how imagination can play such a great role with the use of Erector Sets.
Well, George, is a good point, because I also wanted to mention briefly about the Erector Sets. I think I got an Erector Set when I was 6 years old, and these could be deadly weapons, especially when you incorporated the electric motor that came with the Erector Sets. This was a motor, and it was very slow RPM, but nonetheless,
it got you to where you needed to be.
Yeah, when you were a young curious kid, again, you threw away the manual, and you use the Erector Set to make the incredible drawbridge, right? A mimic from the movie Bridge on the River Kwai. No, I don't want to do that. I want to make a propeller-driven airplane. Make that thing go fast enough with those metal blades, and I might be able to sit on the roof and take off. No. About 7 stitches later on my thumb, I still have no nerve feeling in that thumb, but you get those things spinning, if you got anywhere near that prop wash, you were going to get cut, because some of those erector pieces were very, very sharp. Mike Z, did you make the drawbridge?
No, I never had the Erector Set. I remember I had a set of Lincoln Logs, but one thing I do remember, I have friends of mine who had these, is that when you're a little kid, the concept of power is not clear in your mind. So consequently, you see this little motor, which maybe runs off a few batteries or something, and you really think that you're going to make an airplane with it, or you're going to make some big thing. You don't realize that this thing has about 2 inch-ounces of torque, and it can lift maybe a skinny mosquito, and that's about all you can do with it. But I mean, it's interesting. A lot of guys who are engineers got their first interest in mechanical things and thinking spatially with Erector Sets and with Lincoln Logs and that type of stuff. I was always more of a radio guy, an electronics guy and stuff, but I remember playing with these with my friends. You're right. There are people who collect them now, as you know.
They're highly collectible. A.C. Gilbert came out, I believe, in 1917 with the first Erector Set. It was a large metal cabinet and with the decal, and you fast forward 85, 90 years later, it's basically the same content inside those cases. It's tin, it's metal, flimsy metal that's been machined out, and you always got the little case of the screws and the nuts and the washers. And the little wrench and the screwdriver, the FDA or whoever's in charge now would not allow that to be sold to any child under, 6 years old. Those little screws and nuts. You drop a piece of lint nowadays, and everybody's, well, how did he get that lint in his hand? But you think of all the stuff we ate when we were little, I probably still have a couple of Erector Set screws and nuts and bolts in my system somewhere, bouncing around my appendix. I'm like...
If you ever want to learn a little more about this, there's a great book called The Man Who Changed How Boys and Toys Were Made, and it's the biography of A.C. Gilbert, I believe, and I've got it. It's a really good book. I mean, the whole history of this stuff. But yeah, a lot of guys got, and girls too, kind of got their start with mechanical type things with these things.
Yeah, I had one of each of these. I had a set of Lincoln Logs, I had a set of Tinkertoys, and I had an Erector Set. Sadly, none of them made them to my adulthood. Otherwise, I'd have them probably on my shelf. But I remember that with the Erector Set, you learned how to use a screwdriver, how to use a little wrench, how to tighten the parts, how to dismantle it. A lot of skills. And like Mike, the thing that you pointed out that really sticks out in my mind, no batteries, no electronic gizmos, no nothing. It was all just toys, and you could have.
And I remember imagination.
I remember having hours and hours and hours of fun with these things.
And you could make things. You could actually use your little fingers, or have your friend come over, and it'd be a Saturday afternoon, and a typical scenario would be raining. You couldn't go outside, but you had the Tinkertoys.
Yeah.
And you had the Lincoln Logs, and you had the Erector Set, so you created this Frankenstein cocktail of all the loose toys, because within a week of having a toy, like a big set of Lincoln Logs, you were missing probably 25% of the components. They were gone, never to return, so you would make things out of what was left. And it occupied you and kept you focused just as much as the day the toy was new. And I remember, too, you could come out and you could pick up other things that would add to your Lincoln Log, your cabin. You'd go out and maybe your dad was cutting up some 2x4s or building a shelf or something, and look, there's some molding there, I can use that. And your mind, the fertile mind, when you're 7, 8 years old, the things you could make. And even the bridge, you talked about your little fingers learning how to screw nuts and bolts together. Well, think of the concept with the pulley and the wheel and the motor and stringing that little string that came with the Erector set to pull the bridge up. Now, nobody was there to instruct you how to do that. You had to figure it out yourself.
Well, what a great topic, Mike, and a lot of great memories.
And they are very available. And again, we do have emails. People say, what's the next best thing to collect? It's anything you really like.
Yeah.
I like looking around for things. And one day, there are occasions I'll find a box of something and it'll just turn on the nerve endings from maybe 45, 50 years ago, and I'll grab it. And that's what I collect that day. But you can find these things we've talked about. In fact, you can find anything we've talked about here at Galaxy, primarily on eBay. But there are special interest groups. There's a couple of museums that just specialize in the wooden toys of the 40s through 60s. I don't know the URL, but go to Google and type in wooden toys of the 50s.
Wow.
You'll get a half a dozen museums, and all the pictures are there.
I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to eventually find a set of Lincoln Logs, a set of Tinkertoys, and an Erector set online, and I'm going to try to recapture part of my lost childhood.
You really should, and to stay...
It's fun. I can imagine that it would be relaxing.
It is relaxing to look at. I was going to add pickup sticks to the story, but remember the jar of the big thing of pickup sticks in the cone, and they were nothing more than toothpicks on steroids. And you throw them in a pile, and the name of the game was pick the pickup stick off without collapsing the rest of them. Who would do that nowadays?
Probably outlawed, because I could hear Mom. You'll put your eye out with one of those. They were long and pointy.
You would always put your eye out.
You'll put your eye
out.
So we have money for the emergency room with this.
The world should be full of one-eyed kids, but it's not. So Mom was wrong.
Not exactly. Well, Mike, what great memories. Thanks a lot. And we're going to pause right now for our retro commercial. Go ahead and listen to this, and then we'll be right back with more of Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site right here on the Galaxy Nostalgia Network.
Today, the United States is engaged in a gigantic effort to send men to the moon. For this effort, Pillsbury has developed many special foods. Here is the first one to be made available to the public: Space Food Sticks. To meet the demands of a long space flight, Space Food Sticks had to be a compact, nutritious, high-energy food. That's why they make the perfect between-meal energy snack. Energy for hard play. Energy for hard work. Lasting energy to feel alive. If that sounds better than some of the things your family fills up on between meals, you should try Space Food Sticks for good nutrition and lasting energy in a chewy, tasty snack food. Chocolate, caramel, and peanut butter. About 44 calories. At your grocer's next to the instant breakfast section. Space Food Sticks, the energy snack from U.S. Aerospace Research and Pillsbury.
Space food snacks. Where'd you get your space food snacks? Well, when I went on vacation to planet Mongo, you moron. That's where I got them. Wonder what they would taste like now. What was that, about 15 years old?
That's back from 1969,
69,
I believe.
whoa.
If they were properly stored in your grocer's freezer, they would probably be fine. I don't say that anymore, do they?
No.
In your grocer's freezer case.
Freezer, yes. Yeah.
Yes, where fresh foods are found anywhere. Well, nowadays there are no fresh foods found anywhere, so you're in luck. Keep those, break a space stick open, your battery dies, you need a quick jump. But welcome back here to Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site. That was our retro-mercial. We're here with the entire Galaxy gang today, and we're so glad to have you. Stay tuned and listen to the second half of our show today. We are talking summer in a lot of these shows. We're wrapping up the summer. We're actually past the dog days, but when I think of summer, I think of baseball, and when I think of baseball, I think of Willy Mays. And my good friend George Halalakos also thinks of Willy Mays and the Mets. 1973. George, take it away.
Thanks so very much, Mike. Yes, 40 years ago, we were reminded of how baseball, the great American pastime, continues to mark the passage of time and also reflect different eras. Also during that period, it marked the end of an era. Hall of Fame player Willy Mays was playing his final year with the New York Mets, and Mr. Mays embodied so very much in terms of the very best of baseball and is embedded in our public consciousness, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But in looking at the summer of 1973, it was characterized by a time in which our nation was obsessed with the Watergate scandal, the hangover effect of Vietnam, the ending of the Apollo moon missions, the Yom Kippur War in the Middle East. But for a brief span of time, from mid-August through mid-October of that year, our nation's spirits were lifted. Indeed, they were inspired by a near-miraculous rerun of Major League Baseball's amazing New York Mets, their stellar on-field play that reminded everyone of their spectacular World Series championship that they won 4 years earlier in 1969 against 100-1 odds. And what made it so very special was the inclusion of the aforementioned Willy Mays. Willy Mays is regarded as being perhaps, if not the greatest, one of the greatest players in the history of the game. He represents so very much because he was the star player for both the 1950s and 1960s. He also was a pioneer because he was part of the same group of players along with Jackie Robinson that helped to break the color line and to integrate Major League Baseball. And he was known as the Say Hey Kid. And he was so popular among not only players and the public at large that he's commemorated in song. And here are a few bars of that song.
Say hey, fellas, what's your name? Say who? Say Willie. Say hey. Say who? Swinging at the plate. Say hey. Say who? Say Willie. That giant kid is great. When he hits the ball, it's long gone man. Hits it farther than can't be can. Swings the bat like a little lead pipe. When they reach the ball, it's overripe. Say hey, say who? Say Willie. Say hey, say who? Swinging at the plate. Say hey, say who? Say Willie. That giant kid is great.
Wow, what a great memory. I have to say also that because Willy Mays is so emblazoned in all of the memories of baseball fans of so many generations, one of the things that I recollect also from the summer of 73 was that with Mr. Mays in his swan song, that I felt that another part of my childhood was ending. I noted that in an earlier Galaxy Moonbeam broadcast that we did on the careers of Don Drysdale and Sandy Koufax, and very similar, I felt the same thing with regards to Willy Mays. Here's what happened on the field of play, and again, Mr. Mays was an integral part of all this. In 1973, the amazing Mets posted a win-loss record of 27-13 after August 20th, and that included 21 victories in their last 29 games that enabled them to go from last place to first place by season's end. And even though they posted a total win-loss record of 82-79 for a very modest .509 winning percentage, their record of accomplishment from August 20th afterwards was 0.675, championship ball in any era. Now, the Mets were not only led by the Say Hey Kid, Willy Mays, making clutch plays on the field as well as providing inspiration in the locker room, but they also had a stalwart pitching duo, Tom Seaver and Jerry Kuzman, and ace reliever Tug McGraw. Yes, the father of today's famous country music star, Tim McGraw. Tug McGraw made popular the expression, "you gotta believe," to exhort his teammates to victory. Well, in the end, the New York Mets, they triumphed over the famous Big Red Machine out of Cincinnati to win the National League pennant, and they carried the eventual World Series championship Oakland Athletics to the maximum 7 games. They had actually led the series by a margin of 3-2 before succumbing to the A's in the final 2 games. And as we look back at that magic carpet ride that inspired people who so oftentimes face difficult odds and seemingly are at rock bottom, Roger Angell, the famed baseball writer for the New Yorker magazine, summed it up in a very wistful, appreciative article talking about not only Mr. Mays but also about the Mets. He said, the Mets. What can one feel for them but gratitude for such a season of prizes, for a summer that lasted in the end just 2 afternoons too long. I think Roger Angell spoke not only for the hardcore baseball fan, but also for a nation that was again inspired by the champion of underdogs, the amazing Mets, who I think also are part of the pop culture of that era. Mike Zucchero, I know that you were a young boy growing up in New York at the time of the Mets. I think they transcended the interest of even non-sports fans. What do you recall from that era?
Definitely a cultural phenomenon. You know, the Mets and the Yankees and the Dodgers, I mean, those are the famous New York teams, and I can just remember, I mean, I personally was never, I admit, a big baseball fan, but it seemed to be that even as a kid, I remember being on subways, being on buses, seeing signs all over the place. I believe the Mets logo was orange and blue, correct?
Yes, it was orange and blue, and it was to represent the 2 teams that had moved west in 1958, the New York Giants and the Brooklyn Dodgers. They moved respectively to San Francisco and Los Angeles. So there was no National League team until 1962, and when the New York Metropolitans, as they were originally known, later shortened to the Mets, they adopted the colors of orange and blue to capture the hearts and minds of those disaffected National League fans that felt jilted by their Giant and Dodger teams.
I'm going to throw this over to either Mike or to Gilbert, because what I know about baseball is infinitesimal, but these guys, I'm sure, have forgotten more than I know. So any memories, guys, about the Mets in that time?
Well, the thing that I remember, actually not so much about the Mets, but about Willy Mays. I was always a big fan of the Peanuts comic strip, by Charles M. Schulz. And Willy Mays was featured in that strip, being either mentioned by usually by Charlie Brown, numerous times. One of the running gags in Peanuts was that they had the baseball team, which, they always lost, and their hero, or Charlie Brown's hero, was Willy Mays.
And I believe Schultz himself was a lifelong Giants fan, was he not?
I think he was, yeah. And also, obviously, the fact that Willy Mays, that his name kept appearing in the Peanuts comic strip would indicate that Charles Schulz was a huge fan.
He was such a likable man. I remember being a Cub Scout and receiving Boys Life magazine in 1965, and Willy Mays' picture emblazoned the cover. He was everywhere.
Oh, he did a lot of product, a lot of advertising. He advertised a lot of stuff. Gilbert, I've got him somewhere in one of my old electronics magazines advertising bullhorns, Atlas bullhorns and speakers,
really?
and some cheapy tube testers or something like that.
Darned.
All I had to do was put his picture on it. By the way, the song you played, Say Hey, was that the Treniers? Do you know
the Treniers,
I may
yes.
play that tonight. I forgot what a good tune that was.
You should do that. It's a very catchy tune, and actually George brought that to my attention. I'd never heard it before. It's a very catchy tune.
It's wonderful to remember. And I think the thing so wonderful about Willy Mays is that he was also not only a pioneer from a social standpoint in terms of integrating baseball, but also part of the move from east to west. Because, while the Dodgers had their great stars that later blossomed with the careers of Drysdale and Koufax, Willy Mays, carried the baton for a long time for the team up north. Mike Bragg, what do you remember about the Say Hey Kid and the Miracle Mets?
I lost track of Willy Mays until, of course, that year you're talking about, 1973. And to me, the New York Mets and the 1973 roster lineup, to me, was the beginning of the end of what I would call the old-time baseball crew. You had coaches, you had Roy McMillan, you had Rube Walker, of course you had Yogi Berra at the helm.
Yes.
The good old Yogi Berra, and it would have been just a total mind-blowing trip to have Yogi Berra as manager with Willy Mays as one of your outfielders. You had Tug McGraw, of course, but you also had Tom Seaver, Jim Fregosi in field. You had some of the people who had come over with the Dodgers and the Giants from the East Coast, and it was almost like 73 was almost the swan song year. And you get some of those guys that just led the Mets, and of course the Miracle Dream Team was the Mets, 69 Mets. But you come back in 73, you got Willy Mays. It seemed like a sad goodbye for an era. In 73, it seemed to me the baseball era that I had grown up with had ended. I'd grown up, gone into adulthood, and that was about it. But that was an excellent piece, George. And all you baseball fans, send us your questions, because we've got George here. He's he's the boy of summer, so to speak, as far as the Galaxy gang, and he can answer the questions. We really enjoy getting your ideas over email. You can also Facebook here us at Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site. You can come to galaxymoonbeamnightsite.com for our website. Our email is galaxymoonbeam@gmail.com, and it's just been such a great pleasure to present this show for you today. And we are Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site, the big crew here, the varsity team. I'm Mike.
I'm Smitty.
I'm George saying, say hey.
Yeah, I was just going to say that myself. This is Mike Z. I would say hey also, but I'll say yoo-hoo. How's that? New Yorkers will remember yoo-hoo.
Oh, a yoo-hoo would sound so good in a big old bag of peanuts.
Yep.
Anyway, folks, you got to believe in the words of Tug McGraw, and we'll see you next time. Be talking to you right here at Galaxy Moonbeam Night Site on the Galaxy Nostalgia Network.
The other batters get the Willie blues. Anything hit his way is out. Man, it just don't pay those guys to clout. Say hey, say who? Say Willie, say hey, say who? Swing it at the plate, say hey, say who? Say Willie, that Giants kid is great.
This is the Galaxy Nostalgia Network.